Die droompjes, maar dat droompje. Die droompjes, maar dat droompje. Die droompjes, maar dat droompje. Ons droompjes, onze droom. So let's just clear one thing up. I don't hate the Dutch language. I love it. And you can see that from my channel. This is not like a hate on the Dutch language video. That is not what this is about. This is more things that have really just irritated me, have taken me a long time to learn and really understand and stop making so many mistakes in. These are the real difficult points of the Dutch language for me. So I want to share them with you guys, how I've overcome them, the rules and ways that you use these things, and pass on a bit of my knowledge to you guys. So let's get into the video. My number one thing that really drives me crazy when I'm speaking Dutch is telling the time. In Australian English, we don't use 24-hour time that often. We work off 12-hour time. So that was probably the first thing that I really had to get used to, was using 24-hour time to talk about time. And then the next thing is when it comes to half past times, that you have this half-3 is actually 2:30, not 3:30, which is what it would be in English. So you would say 3:30, which means 30 minutes past 3, but half-3 is actually like 30 minutes for 3 o'clock. So it's before 3 o'clock, 30 minutes before 3 is how I literally have to translate it in my head to try and like make sense of it. So then it's actually 2:30. And then because these half times are just as important in Dutch, you've also got 10 voor and 10 over, the half time. So you can have 10 over half 3, which is actually 2 hours and 40 minutes, 2:40. And in English, you would just say it's 20 to 3. I feel like every time I have to tell the time, I have like this mental brain fart where I'm like, it's one of the things that I still constantly have to translate back and forth between English and Dutch, Dutch and English. My brain is like, okay, we're making a plan, we're making a time, we're setting a time for something, and then I literally have to like visualize the numbers to make sure that I'm getting the time right. Telling the time in Dutch is confusing. It has taken me a long time to grasp it, and I still make mistakes, and it's crazy. It's an annoying way to tell the time for me. Okay. I've talked about this in another video in things that I always get wrong in Dutch, and a lot of you gave me tips and, encouragement to say it doesn't always matter. We can still understand what you're saying. The thing is, though, is that with articles, de and het, it does influence the rest of the sentence. So it influences things like ons and onze. It influences die and dat. And it also influences the adjectives that you use to describe that noun. So whether you add an E onto the end of it or not. This drives me nuts because the whole flow of the sentence is then changed and sounds wrong when you make a mistake. So I understand why it's irritating for Dutch speakers to hear people making mistakes, because now that I'm getting used to some of the combinations, I can hear them too and I think, oh, that doesn't sound right. So I get it, but it just makes more sense to not have these different articles. And maybe that's just my English brain speaking, where I think, let's just do away with having multiple articles to describe a noun. So let me explain this with an example. Let's take the word droom. So to dream in English. So you've got de droom, which is then die droom of onze droom. If you use a diminutive, so if it becomes droompje, you had a little dream, then it becomes het. Het is always used with diminutives. But if you have more than one little dream, then it becomes de again, because de is always used with plurals. So now you've got de droom, het droompje, and de droompjes. This is where the confusion starts to come in. Do you then have die droompjes, maar dat droompje? onze droompjes, onze droom, maar ons droompjes. If you want to describe the dream, then you're going to have to use a E on the end of your adjective. So it was a lange droom instead of just lang droom. That doesn't really sound right anymore. So you can see how learning these rules are important because they influence different aspects of the sentence and what you're saying. Okay, moving on. The next thing I want to talk about is when you're writing Dutch and when to add a T, when to use just a D, and when to use TD or TE or DE. The different rules, are we talking present tense, are we talking past tense? And obviously when you're speaking, because D and T make the same sound when they're at the end of the word, it's really hard to actually, it's impossible. It's impossible to hear the difference when people are speaking, but then that translates over to when you're writing and you need to know these rules. Okay, so let's talk first about adding a T. When you are adding a T, this is usually conjugated with you, he, or she. So let's take, for example, the verb werken. You take the stem, which is werk, and then you add a T on it when you're conjugating it with you, she, or he. So ik werk, but then jij werkt, zij werkt, en hij werkt. Hoor je dat? So you add the T. Now, say for example, we pick a verb that ends in D. So brand. Brand, because it ends in a D, is pronounced with a T sound. However, when you write it, you do need to add in the extra T when you're conjugating it with you, he, or she. So ik brand, jij brandt, hij brandt, zij brandt. Sounds the same, but it's actually written differently. So you always add the T when it's being conjugated with you, she, or he. So that's where you get that DT combination coming in. Now let's take another verb, one that ends in T. Rust. Ik rust, jij rust, zij rust, hij rust. Never in Dutch do you add a double last consonant. So you don't add an extra T, even though you're conjugating it with jij, zij, and hij. So it stays the same. It stays the same for ik, it stays the same for jij, it stays the same for hij, and it stays the same for zij. Ik rust, zij rust, hij rust, jij rust. Now let's talk about verleden tijd, so the past tense. One of the most important acronyms you need to learn if you want to conjugate verbs in the past tense is hoofdschip. Hoofdschip is made up of letters that will let you know when to add TE and when to add DE. So if your verb ends in one of the letters that is written in hoofdschip, then you add TE. If the letter isn't in that word, then you add DE. So an example of this, we can go back to those first verbs and let's talk about werken. So werken with the K is in the word hoofdschip. So if we want to talk about worked, like in the past, I worked and he worked and she worked, we add TE. Ik werkte. Jij werkte. See what I mean? So the other verb that we used was brand. Yes, we pronounce it with a T when it's by itself, but let's conjugate it into the past tense. So D is not in the word hoofdschip, which means that we conjugate it with DE. And because it already ends with a D, you actually do a double D, DE. So ik brandde, jij brandde, zij brandde, hij brandde. And our last one, which was rust, again, T, the last letter of rust, is in hoofdschip. So we add TE. Ik rustte, jij rustte, zij rustte, and hij rustte. Once you know the rules, it is actually kind of easy, but it can take a lot of getting used to, especially if you're using a lot of audio to practice Dutch, and then all of a sudden you need to start writing and you're like, wait, why am I spelling this wrong all the time? Or it's not looking quite right on the page, even though you pronounce it the same. So be aware of that. It is one of the things that I find super irritating about the Dutch. Now, the Germans are notorious for doing this as well, where you grab a bunch of words that seem semi-related and you smush them all together to make one big long word. So an example of this in Dutch would be meervoudige persoonlijkheidsstoornis. It's such a long word, and yet there's no breaks. We have this word in English, of course, it's multiple personality disorder, but we space the words out because we don't have as much of a tendency to join words together in the English language. So you have these examples of really long words, and I've tried looking up the rules for this, where apparently if the words are related, you can basically join them together. But then when do you not join it together? So for example, you've got like smaller words, omdat, zomaar, these little sort of combination words, but then te veel is written apart from each other. So when do you do it and when don't you do it? If one of you guys know the rule, let me know in the comments, because I would love to have something a little more concrete to go off. I never know when I'm joining the right words together. Sometimes words that I think should be written apart, people say, oh no, you should be joining them together. So when do you do it and when don't you do it? Let me know. Okay, now my last gripe with the Dutch language is that you guys have a lot of words that have more than one meaning. So take, for example, the word meer. Meer is like saying more, which is kind of logical. You think, okay, that kind of sounds like the English version, but then it also means lake. So you really have to understand the context of the sentence in the conversation to understand what someone's saying. And this is not the only example of this happening. You've got weer, which is, again, to do something again, but it also means the weather. So you've got these completely unrelated concepts, but they share a word. Someone in the comments the other day posted that the word weg means like road or path, but it also means go away. And I can kind of mentally think, okay, well, like you leave on a path. So they share a very similar sort of concept, and then they share a word. But meer and weer aren't really in that same basket. Another word that I, in the beginning, was very confused by was erg. Erg means very. If something's extra or very, was it erg bijzonder? Was it exceptional? Was it really good? Erg bijzonder. But erg can also mean annoying or irritating or horrible. It's kind of not as bad as horrible. It's like one step down from horrible. So people would ask you, vond je het erg? Of was het erg? And I would wait for them to finish their sentence and be like, what was very? Was very what? Was very what? What was very? It used to not make any sense to me, and I would be like, what are you asking me? Vond je het erg? And if you repeat the sentence, I still didn't get it. I didn't know what you were saying. So erg was one that really tripped me up in the beginning, and now I obviously get it. But yeah, you can have some awkward moments with these words that actually share two meanings. These have been my little annoyances with the Dutch language. And again, don't get me wrong, I love the Dutch language, and I know that these are the things that make a language beautiful and make a language unique and fun to learn, but it also makes it really irritating when you are constantly making the same mistakes over and over again. So these are the things that I have issues with. Let me know in the comments, what do you guys have issues with? What have you found have been these really weird, strange rules in the Dutch language that you just think, why? Why do we do that? This makes no sense. So I'm interested to hear what you guys think. If you liked this video, please give it a big thumbs up. And if you like watching videos about the Dutch language, then please remember to subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.